Jennifer Gledhill's scream echoed through the quiet neighborhood that night. Neighbors would later say it was the kind of sound that didn't just fade, it clung to you. Inside her living room, the walls bore witness to the unthinkable. Jennifer, fighting for her life against the very man she once trusted, Mark, her secret lover, had crossed a line no one imagined. His obsession boiled over into rage, his hands tightening as Jennifer struggled beneath him. The affair that once promised escape had turned into a nightmare, one that ended with silence. When her body finally went still, Mark stumbled back, trembling. The reality of what he had done hung in the air, heavier than the room itself. He stared at Jennifer, the woman he claimed to love, now lifeless on the floor, and then, knocked out a sound at the door. Mark froze, his heart hammering. Someone was there. Someone who could see everything. The knock grew louder. Jennifer? You home? It was Robert, her husband. He had forgotten his wallet and returned earlier than planned. Mark's stomach dropped. If Robert walked in, the secret would unravel in an instant. Mark panicked. He dragged Jennifer's body toward the stairs, his hands shaking so hard he nearly tripped over her. The knock became pounding. Jen. At last, Robert pushed the door open. Honey? The living room was empty, or so it seemed. A faint smear of blood had escaped onto the rug, half hidden in shadow. Robert didn't see it. He glanced around, frowning, before heading upstairs. In the silence that followed, Mark pressed himself against the wall, barely breathing, Jennifer's lifeless form hidden in the darkness just behind him. Robert called out again upstairs, Jen? You there? His voice echoed, but there was no answer. He sighed, assuming she had stepped out. Without noticing the faint trace of blood near the rug, he grabbed his wallet and left. The front door closed. Silence. Mark let out a shaky breath, his entire body trembling. He stared at Jennifer's still face, guilt and panic twisting inside him. For a brief moment, he thought about calling for help, claiming it was an accident. But then another thought struck him. If Robert finds out, I'm finished. He wrapped Jennifer's body in a blanket, dragging her toward the back door. The night was cold, the yard empty, and Mark's every movement felt louder than thunder. In the distance, a dog barked. A porch light flicked on. Mark froze in the shadows, terrified someone had seen him. Mark staggered under Jennifer's weight as he pulled her toward his car. His hands slipped, leaving dark streaks on the driveway. Every creak, every gust of wind felt like an alarm screaming his guilt. He stuffed her into the trunk, slamming it shut just as a car passed down the street. The headlights washed over him, and for a moment he froze, sure they would stop. But the car kept going, heart pounding. Mark slid into the driver's seat and started the engine. The hum sounded deafening in the quiet night. He gripped the wheel, sweat dripping down his face, but just as he pulled out of the driveway, flashing lights appeared in his rearview mirror. The red and blue lights grew closer, painting the road in color. Mark's chest tightened. He pressed harder on the gas, the car swerving off the pavement and into the trees. Branches whipped against the windshield as sirens screamed behind him, "Stop the car!" Voices shouted. The chase tore through mud and grass until Mark lost control. The vehicle slammed into a tree with a violent crunch. Smoke hissed from the engine as airbags exploded. Dazed, Mark shoved the door open and stumbled into the woods. Flashlights cut through the darkness as officers followed, their voices echoing. "Suspect on foot. Don't let him escape." Mark pushed deeper into the forest, his breath ragged, until he spotted it, an old, broken-down cabin standing alone in the shadows. He staggered inside, collapsing in the corner. For the first time since Jennifer's death, silence surrounded him, and then, a creak. He wasn't alone. The cabin was dark, the air thick with dust. Mark's ears strained at the sound, footsteps, slow and heavy across the wooden floor. "Who's there?" he whispered, gripping a rusted pipe. No answer. Then a voice, soft and chilling. Mark, his blood ran cold. It sounded like Jennifer. Before he could react, flashlights pierced through the cracks. Police shouted outside. "We've got him, inside the cabin." The door burst open, officers storming in with weapons raised. Mark dropped the pipe, shielding his face from the blinding lights, but in the corner of his eye, he saw her, Jennifer, standing pale and silent, staring right at him. Then a gunshot cracked. The room exploded in chaos, the gunshot echoed through the cabin like thunder. Mark dropped to the floor, his hands covering his head, expecting pain, but none came. The shot had been fired as a warning, aimed into the ceiling. Within seconds, officers swarmed him, pinning him to the rotting floorboards. His wrists were snapped into handcuffs, his frantic struggle useless against the weight of the law. Dragged outside, Mark was shoved into the harsh glow of red and blue lights. His face was streaked with mud and sweat, his eyes wide with terror, or madness. Reporters would later say he looked less like a killer and more like a man consumed by something he couldn't control. As dawn broke, the forest revealed the path of his desperate escape, the wrecked car, the footprints in the mud, and finally the cabin that became his last hiding place. But the real story, the one everyone wanted to know, was what had led to Jennifer Gledhill's death. The trial began weeks later, the courthouse filled with journalists and neighbors. Robert Gledhill sat in the front row, his face pale and heavy with grief. He had lost his wife, and now he was about to hear the details that would haunt him forever. The prosecution laid out the story piece by piece. Jennifer and Mark's secret affair, the promises Mark believed, the growing tension between her and Robert, and finally, the violent night when obsession turned into murder. They showed the text messages where Jennifer hesitated to leave her marriage. They revealed motel receipts, hidden meetups, and the timeline that ended in her death. The courtroom listened in silence as the prosecutor's voice cut through. This wasn't love. This was control. When Jennifer chose to stay with her family, Mark decided if he couldn't have her, no one would. Mark himself took the stand. His eyes darted wildly, his words spilling in a mix of denial and obsession. She loved me. She promised me. Robert never understood her. She wanted to be with me. But the jury wasn't moved. They saw the bruises, the fingerprints, the lies. They saw not a man in love, but a man who let obsession consume him until nothing else mattered. The verdict came swiftly, guilty on all counts. When the judge sentenced him to life without parole, the room exhaled. Some wept in relief. Others whispered prayers. Robert simply lowered his head, hands clenched tight, as though bracing against another blow. Mark screamed as guards dragged him away. She was mine. She loved me. She loved me. His words faded as the doors slammed shut behind him. Outside, reporters crowded Robert, asking for a statement. He paused for a long time before speaking, his voice low but steady. Jennifer wasn't perfect. But she deserved to live. She deserved a future. That was stolen from her. Not just from me, but from everyone who loved her. The case of Jennifer Gledhill would linger long after the cameras turned away. Neighbors still remembered her laughter, friends still recalled her kindness, and Robert was left with memories that cut like glass. And Mark? He sat alone in a cell, haunted by the very love he twisted into destruction. A secret affair, a brutal murder, and a lesson written in tragedy. Obsession is not love, sometimes, it's a death sentence.